Hello and welcome to 3 Minute Gaming. I'm Nathan, and today I've got a skills guide for Black Myth Wukong. Hey everybody, and welcome to OP in 1 hour, my guide series on getting the best possible start in a bunch of video games. And with Black Myth Wukong finally out, I'm playing it and it's a ton of fun. Check out the review, but something I found was the game has an absolute boatload of skills, and it was quite hard for me early on to figure out what did what and which trees are worth investing into. Well, after getting through most of the game and resetting the skill tree like 10 times, I think I have a decent grasp on skills overall, and can help explain the ones I found empowering and which I didn't. So let's cut to the chase and start it up. Here's a beginner's guide to skills, as well as some general tips for Black Myth Wukong. So if you want to just hear me ramble about skills, you can skip this part, but if you want to know more about what guided my decision, as well as some tips, keep watching. First off, something I didn't know going in is there's actually not very many weapons in Wukong, meaning your attack power doesn't go up very often and not by a whole lot. This means you should prioritize skills that increase damage should you want to do more attack damage. Secondly, in Chapter 2, you unlock the ability to turn items into defensive stat raises, stuff like hit point, mana, stamina, and so on. Because of this, I don't recommend prioritizing using skill points on those kinds of abilities unless you're really struggling. You can also find upgrades in the world for these as well. Third, this game is very dodge heavy and has a very active playstyle. I'm going to suggest things based on how I experienced and played the game personally, but if you have a different playstyle, please feel free to experiment. After all, you can refund any skill for free. Fourth, always sit at a meditation area if you find one, as it gives you one free skill point. Fifth and finally, don't be afraid to use potions, especially ones like damage reduction. You'll have borderline unlimited numbers after you learn to craft them, as the plants respawn when you die, so pound those pots when you're fighting bosses. Good, great. All right, let's cover each self-advancement one column at a time, starting with Foundation. So Foundation has some decent stuff, but if I'm being honest, I didn't go as deep as I thought I would here, except down the stamina tree. Before I go into each column specifically, there's two I absolutely recommend maxing out as soon as you can. The first is Simian Agility, which reduces the stamina cost of dodging, as you are going to be dodging all over the place all the time, and you'll need that stamina. And Swift Engage, I personally think should have just been a default skill, but whatever. Essentially, this lets you start your attack combos further away from the enemy, which again becomes necessary pretty quick on fast-moving bosses. As mentioned, the stamina tree is where I mostly live, and in addition to Simian Agility, you should absolutely consider getting Composure, which lets you dodge mid-combo and then continue the combo, allowing you to finish combos for more damage. The rest of the tree is generally pretty good, but there's something I want to bring up, and it's a skill that tricked me and actually kind of sucked, which is Vengeful Mirage at the very bottom. This makes your perfect dodge damage enemies, which sounds totally awesome, but in my experience, it does barely any damage and often doesn't even interrupt larger enemies. It's a big point investment that's not worth digging to. Before I leave this tree, I'll point out I did put a value point on Focused Breath, because more stamina regen is always good, but it's up to you. On the martial arts tree, you absolutely again should get Swift Engage, but Mobile Spin is also pretty crucial, as this game loves annoying ranged enemies, and this lets you actually move to close distance when they blast at you. I didn't get any more of the Mobile Spin moves though. I didn't find them particularly useful. The left side has all good stuff. Effortless Finisher is really crucial to generate focus fast, and if you have extra points to burn, Punishing Downpour says extra damage on it, so you know we want it. It also makes your stick glow red, which is pretty cool. For the survival tree, as mentioned, I found a lot of it to be a wash, as you can upgrade these in other ways and they aren't worth the points, but there are two exceptions here. Raising maximum mana is actually really helpful, as through most of the game, there's no easy way to restore mana in big boss fights or out in the field. You can't bump it up till later in the game anyway, but it's worth considering. And speaking of later in the game, Surging Momentum increases attack, which as mentioned, raises really slowly over the course of the game, so dumping points in this is almost always worth it. As an aside, I did put some points in critical chance for a while, but it only gives 1% per point, which I found not to be worth it, unless you're really going deep into a crit build. Alright, let's move on to staff stances, and this is where things get interesting. Smash is the default one that you get for free, but you're gonna have to pay 1 point to unlock the others, but keep in mind there's no rule saying you have to have all three, or you should diversify. I personally recommend finding the stance that fits your playstyle and investing heavily in that, and maybe ignoring the others. I have a recommendation for the one I like, but we'll get to it in a minute. What's also important about this tree is dumping points in it is how you increase your focus, which means you should absolutely prioritize at least getting it to 2 focus as fast as possible. Pushing it to 4 honestly isn't really worth it early on, and honestly I didn't find a bunch of use for it later on either, but if you happen to get there, good for you. Lastly, the leftmost skills apply for all stances, so let's go over those first, and there's some decent ones. Exhilaration gives you health when you burn a focus point, and I found that it's much better later in the game than early. The main reason is the way it works best is if you have a bunch of focus banked, like 3, and then burn it all at once in a big hit, you get a decent amount of healing. But if you only have 1 focus, it really doesn't heal you much at all, and probably isn't worth the point. Versatility says increased damage, so we want it. Basically, this increases combo damage when you do a heavy attack during a fast chain, which you will be doing all of the time, so yeah, max this. Secondary damage is further down and is very expensive at 2 points each, but was insanely powerful. I didn't turn damage numbers on, so I don't know the specific specifics of how much that health percentage works, but from a practical standpoint, I was killing enemies much quicker with points in it using heavy strikes. Plus again, gives damage, so yeah, invest in it. It rules. For chapter 1, you're mostly only going to have access to smash stuff, so I'll cover that tree very briefly. But based on my personal playstyle, which was more fast and loose, I pretty much avoided the entirety of Smash's left column and instead focused on the right one. Resolute counterflow is a must get early on. It might even be the first point you spend. This lets you attack with a heavy hit in a chain, and that attack has iframes, which is pretty cool. Should those iframes dodge an attack, the enemy becomes easier to stagger. You really need this just so you have some variety in your combos. The rest of the tree is about exploiting those iframe dodges. I got Whirling Wind and went down to Skyfall Strike and then stopped. The bottom two are okay, but at that point I changed stances. And speaking of stances, now it's time for my personal opinion. Having tried all three stances, I think Thrust Stance is the best one by a country mile. For me, it felt like it fit the playstyle the game was leaning me towards. Keeping distance, rushing in with light attacks to build meter, and then backing away for a big smacking thrust. I should also mention that its heavy strike has an insane range, meaning you can borderline snipe some enemies in combat with it. I'm not going to name any specific skills, but something worth noting is its mid-combo heavy attack first dodges away, and then if you press it again, you do a stick poke. But the dodge doesn't take focus, meaning you can use a heavy attack in lieu of a dodge to quickly retreat and then reassess if you think a hit's safe. Also, similar to the normal heavy attack, it has insane range, and so you're basically hitting people from another time zone. So yeah, once you hit the level to unlock Thrust Stance, reset some points and definitely give it a try because I really liked it. Alright, so in chapter 1, you only have 3 skills: Immobilize, Cloud Step, and Transformation. I like 2 of these. Immobilize is fantastic. I used it the entire game as it can freeze everything including bosses. Absolutely get stagnation as fast as possible, as it means just hitting guys increases the duration of the next time you freeze them, which is great with bosses. The left tree is also really good. The third skill, Spirit Shards, refund you some mana after the enemy unfreezes, which is really nice. And if you have good timing, the one that rewards you for freezing them when they are in an attack animation, like doubles the duration. It's insane. It's worth learning how to do. Cloud Step was one I didn't end up playing with because it didn't fit my playstyle, and I swapped it with the stone counter move once I unlocked it in chapter 2. Transformations are insanely powerful, so if you have some spare points, dump them into it. Making might decay slower and generate faster both are really good. I found those combined was actually better than increasing the maximum might, but it's up to you. And overall, those are my recommendations. Let's TLDR it in case you're rewatching the video. From Foundation, Swift Engage, and Simulant Agility are must-gets and max them. Effortless Finisher is vital for combos. Mobile Spin is really important when you're fighting ranged foes. Composure is great to keep combos going. Vengeful Mirage is a trap and I fell for it, so you shouldn't. And I personally don't think the survival tree is worth investing in early unless you're really struggling. In stances, Exhilaration is good once you have 3 focus. Don't bother until then. Versatility is a must-get once it unlocks. Secondary damage is also a must-get once it unlocks. In the Smash tree, Resolute Counterflow should probably be the first point you spend in the game, and I personally love thrusting. Just thrusting all day with my big monkey stick. As a favor for me, swap some points and try thrusting when you hit the required level. And overall, those are my recommendations. Of course, you should absolutely experiment yourself as there's no penalty since you can swap points out at any time, and despite my get good attitude, there's no shame in dropping some points in health early to make the beginning easier, and then just take them out later as you learn to dodge more proficiently. And that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this guide was helpful in letting you know which skills I think are good and which ones are less good for Black Myth Wukong. Please be sure to check out the other OP in 1 hour videos. We have guides for Elden Ring, Dark Souls, Fallout, and more, and be sure to check out the Black Myth Wukong review on the channel. Regardless, please let me know what you think about this video and what skills you are using in the comments, and then go out there and have a great time going monkey mode.